My name is Leela, and I am a 19-year-old student at the University of Michigan in the beautiful, but often freezing city of Ann Arbor, Michigan. I want to tell you a story about how I reclaimed my peace of mind during my freshman year of college, because that year was supposed to be the best time of my life, but it quickly turned into a living nightmare, thanks to the person I had to share 10 square feet of space with every single day. When I first moved into my dorm room in South Quadrangle, I was so excited to start my journey as a biology major, and I spent hours picking out the perfect extra long twin sheets and a cute rug that I thought would make the room feel like home. My roommate was a girl named Chloe, who seemed okay at first, but I soon realized that she was the most arrogant and self-centered human being I had ever met in my entire life. Chloe was from a very wealthy suburb of Detroit, and she never let me forget it for even a single second. She spent the first week of our semester bragging to everyone on our floor about how she was the most popular girl at her high school and how she used to throw these massive parties where hundreds of people would show up just to be near her. She had this way of talking down to people like they were her personal assistants, and she treated our dorm room like it was her private palace, while I was just a guest she was barely tolerating. Chloe was tall and always wore expensive designer clothes, and she spent hours in front of the mirror doing her makeup, while I was trying to study for my heavy workload of chemistry and calculus classes. The real problem started about a month into the semester, when Chloe decided that her social life was more important than my right to sleep or have any privacy at all. She started dating this guy named Tyler, who was a sophomore, and honestly, he was not very nice either. Chloe would brag about how she had managed to snag a sophomore, but then she would bring him back to our room at all hours of the night. Our room was very small, and we had a bunk bed set up, where I slept on the bottom bunk, and Chloe slept on the top bunk. This meant that whenever Tyler came over, I was literally 3 feet away from whatever they were doing. It started with them just whispering and giggling, which was annoying enough when I had an 8 a.m. biology lab the next morning, but then it got much worse. Chloe had no respect for me at all, and she would start getting intimate with Tyler, while I was right there underneath them in the bottom bunk. It was the most uncomfortable and degrading feeling in the world to be trapped in my own bed while the wooden frame of the bunk bed creaked and groaned above my head. I would lay there staring at the wooden slats of her bed, feeling my face get hot with anger and embarrassment. Eventually, I would get so fed up that I would grab my hoodie and my backpack and trek across the snowy campus to the undergraduate library just so I did not have to listen to them anymore. I would stay at the library until 3 or 4 in the morning, waiting for a text from her saying that he was gone, but she never even bothered to send one. I would just have to guess when it was safe to return to my own room. This happened at least 3 or 4 times every single week, and it was taking a massive toll on my mental health and my grades because I was constantly exhausted and stressed out. I tried to handle it like a mature adult at first, because that is what they tell you to do during freshman orientation. I sat Chloe down one afternoon when she was busy scrolling through her social media feed, and I told her very calmly that I was struggling to sleep and that I really needed some boundaries regarding guests in the room. I asked her if we could agree on a schedule or at least have a rule that guests had to leave by midnight on school nights. Chloe just looked at me like I was a piece of gum stuck to the bottom of her expensive leather boots, and she laughed in my face. She told me that I was being a prude, and that if I wanted a quiet room, I should have stayed at home with my parents instead of coming to a big university like the University of Michigan. She told me that she was living her best life and that she was not going to let a boring person like me ruin her fun. I felt so small and defeated in that moment, but I decided to try the official route. I went to see our resident assistant, whose name was Sarah, to ask for help with a roommate mediation. Sarah was nice enough, but she was also a 19-year-old student who just wanted to stay out of trouble, and it turned out that she and Chloe were actually in the same sorority. When I tried to explain the situation to Sarah, she just sighed and said that living in a dorm is all about compromise and that I should try to be more flexible. She did not even give Chloe a warning or try to set up a meeting between us. After that, Chloe became even more blatant with her disrespect because she knew I had gone to the resident assistant and she wanted to punish me for it. She started eating my snacks that I kept on my shelf, and she would leave her dirty laundry on my desk just to be mean. One night, I came back from a long study session to find that she had let Tyler use my expensive noise canceling headphones without even asking me. I was reaching my breaking point, and I felt like I was drowning in my own life. The low point came during midterms week when I had a huge examination in organic chemistry, which is one of the hardest classes at the university. I had been studying for 10 hours straight, and I just wanted to get 5 hours of sleep before the test. I got into bed at 11 o'clock, and I was just starting to drift off when Chloe and Tyler burst into the room smelling like cheap perfume and bad decisions. They did not even turn off the lights, and they started being loud and physical right above me. When I asked them to please be quiet for just one night, Chloe looked over the side of the bunk and told me to shut up and put a pillow over my head. I spent that entire night sitting in a 24-hour diner down the street, crying into a cup of lukewarm coffee because I was too tired to even study anymore. I ended up getting a C on my midterm exam, which was the lowest grade I had ever received in my life. I knew right then that I could not let her keep doing this to me. I needed to stand up for myself, but I knew that talking and following the rules would not work with someone as entitled as Chloe. I needed a plan that would teach her a lesson she would never forget, and I wanted it to be poetic. The opportunity presented itself when I overheard Chloe talking on the phone to her mother about a very important date she had coming up with Tyler. Apparently, Tyler was finally taking her to a very expensive Italian restaurant in downtown Ann Arbor called Manny Osteria, and she was bragging about how much money he was going to spend on her. She kept saying how this was a special night and how she needed to look perfect because she wanted him to ask her to be his official girlfriend. I knew that this was my moment to strike. I went to the CVS pharmacy on South State Street, and I bought a box of extra-strength laxatives that were disguised as little chocolate squares. I also bought a small personal-sized package of Oreo cookies, which were the kind that only had about 8 or 10 cookies in a single row. I went back to the dorm when I knew Chloe was at her afternoon classes, and I carefully went to work. I took the Oreo cookies, and I used a small butter knife to gently pull them apart so the cream center was exposed. I took the extra-strength laxative squares, and I melted them down just a little bit until they were soft, and then I spread the medication onto the cream of 4 of the cookies. I pressed the chocolate wafers back together very carefully so that they looked completely normal and untouched. I then took the remaining 4 normal cookies, and I put them at the very top of the package so that if anyone looked closely, they would see perfectly fine cookies. I placed the doctored cookies at the bottom of the stack where they would be the last ones eaten. That evening, I went to the student lounge, which was a common area where a lot of people hung out before going out for the night. I sat on one of the couches with my open package of Oreo cookies, and I waited for Chloe to appear. She came out of our room about 30 minutes later looking very dressed up in a tight dress and high heels. She looked like she was starving because she had mentioned earlier that she was skipping lunch so she could fit into her dress better. As she walked past me, I was munching on the first of the normal cookies from the top of the package. I made sure to make a satisfied sound, and I acted like they were the most delicious cookies in the world. Chloe stopped and looked at the package with a hungry expression on her face. I looked up at her and put on my best fake friendly smile, which was hard to do because I found her so repulsive. I said, "Hey Chloe, I am feeling kind of full, and I do not want to ruin my appetite for the pizza I am getting later. Do you want the rest of these cookies?" Her eyes lit up like a Christmas tree, and she said, "Oh my God, yes, I am literally dying of hunger, and Tyler is not picking me up for another hour, so this will totally hold me over until dinner." She reached down and took the package from my hand, and she did not just take 1 or 2 cookies. She proceeded to scarf down all of the remaining cookies, including every single one of the cookies that I had loaded with the extra-strength laxative. She told me thanks, and then she turned around and strutted back into our room to finish her hair. I had to bury my face in my chemistry textbook to hide the massive grin that was spreading across my face. I could feel my heart racing with a mix of nerves and pure excitement, because I knew that the clock was officially ticking. About 45 minutes later, Tyler arrived at the dorm looking all smug in his button-down shirt, and they left together for their big fancy dinner. I decided to hang out in the lounge with some of my actual friends from my biology classes, and we just relaxed and talked about our upcoming labs. I did not tell them what I had done because I wanted to keep it a secret for as long as possible. A few hours passed, and I was back in our room catching up on some reading when I heard the heavy door to our room fly open. Chloe came rushing and looking absolutely frantic, and her face was a strange shade of pale green that I had never seen before. She did not even say a word to me as she grabbed her bathrobe and sprinted down the hallway toward the communal bathrooms. She was gone for a very long time, and when she finally came back, she looked like she had just finished running a marathon in the middle of a desert. She was sweating, and her makeup was smeared all over her face from what I assumed was the stress of the situation. I looked up from my book, and I used my most innocent voice to ask her how her big date at the Italian restaurant went. Chloe groaned and collapsed onto her bed, and she started telling me about the most embarrassing night of her entire life. She said that they were right in the middle of their appetizers, which were some kind of fancy, toasted bread with toppings, when her stomach started making noises so loud that the people at the table next to them actually turned around to look. She said she thought it was just gas from not eating all day, but then the first wave of pain hit her like a lightning bolt. She had to excuse herself and run to the restaurant bathroom, which she said was tiny and had very thin walls. She spent 20 minutes in there, and when she finally came back out, she was shaking and Tyler looked very confused. They had barely started their main courses of expensive pasta when the second wave hit her, and this time she knew she was in big trouble. She told me she had to tell Tyler that she was suddenly feeling very sick and that they had to leave immediately before the food even arrived. Tyler was annoyed because he had already paid a deposit for the reservation, and he had to pay for the full meal anyway. On the car ride back, Chloe said she was praying to every god she could think of that she would not have an accident in Tyler's brand new car, which had expensive leather seats. She said she barely made it into the dorm building before she had to run again. She looked at me with tears in her eyes and said she was so embarrassed and that she was sure Tyler would never want to see her again because she had spent the entire date in the bathroom and then forced him to drive her home in a total panic. I sat there nodding my head and making sympathetic noises like, "Oh, that is so terrible, and I am so sorry that happened to you." Inside, I was absolutely dying of laughter because the plan had worked even better than I had imagined. The poetic justice of her missing out on her fancy dinner after she had made me miss out on so much sleep was just perfect. For the next 2 days, Chloe was basically tethered to the bathroom, and she was too weak to bring Tyler or anyone else over to the room. This gave me the first 2 nights of uninterrupted sleep I had enjoyed since the beginning of the semester. I felt like a completely different person after getting 8 hours of rest, and I was finally able to focus on my schoolwork again. The best part was that the experience seemed to take the wind out of Chloe's sails. She stopped bragging so much about her popularity because she was too busy worrying about her digestive system, and she was genuinely humiliated by what had happened with Tyler. Tyler actually did stop calling her after that night because he was a shallow jerk who did not want to deal with a girlfriend who got sick on their first big date, which just made the victory even sweeter for me. A few days later, I was hanging out with my best friend named Maya, who also lived in the dorm, and I finally decided to tell her what I had done. Maya almost fell off her chair laughing, and she told me that I was a genius. We went out and bought a 6-pack of cheap college beer to celebrate my successful revenge, and we sat in the courtyard of the University of Michigan Union laughing about the whole thing. From that point on, the dynamic in our room changed significantly. Chloe was still not my favorite person in the world, but she was much more cautious around me. I think she had a subconscious fear of me, or maybe she just realized that she was not as untouchable as she thought she was. She started asking me if it was okay before she brought people over, and she actually started respecting the midnight curfew on school nights. My grades started to improve, and I ended up getting an A on my final exam in organic chemistry, which felt like the ultimate payoff for everything I had endured. I stayed in that room for the rest of the year, and while it was never perfect, it was definitely tolerable. Looking back on it now as a 19-year-old who is a little bit wiser, I do not feel any guilt for what I did. Sometimes in life, you have to play a little dirty to get people to treat you with the basic respect you deserve, especially when you are dealing with someone who thinks the whole world revolves around them. Chloe learned that her actions have consequences, and I learned that I have the strength to stand up for myself when I am pushed too far. The University of Michigan is a big place, and it can be easy to feel like you do not have any power, but I found my power in a small package of Oreo cookies and a little bit of creative thinking. I am now in my sophomore year, and I have a new roommate who is wonderful and kind, and we actually have a written roommate agreement that we both follow. I still see Chloe around campus, sometimes wearing her designer clothes and walking with a new group of friends. But whenever I see her, I just smile to myself and think about those cookies. It is a memory that I will keep with me for a very long time as a reminder that justice can be very sweet, or in this case, a little bit salty and very effective. I also make sure to always keep a pack of Oreos on my shelf, just in case I ever need to remind someone of the rules again, although I have not had to use my special recipe since that fateful night in freshman year. The air in Ann Arbor is cold today as I walk toward the Rackham Graduate School building for a lecture, but my heart is warm with the satisfaction of a job well done. I have realized that the college experience is not just about the books and the lectures, but also about learning how to navigate the difficult people you will meet throughout your life. You have to find a way to survive and thrive even when you're stuck in a 10 by 12 foot room with a nightmare of a human being. I survived, and I did more than just survive, I won. The rest of my semester went by in a blur of late-night study sessions in the Shapiro Undergraduate Library and coffee dates with friends at the coffee shops on Liberty Street. I felt like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders, and I was finally able to enjoy the beautiful architecture of the Law Quad and the energy of the big football games at the Michigan Stadium without the constant dread of going back to my dorm. Chloe eventually found a new boyfriend, but she never brought him back to our room while I was there again. I think she learned her lesson about respecting boundaries, and I learned that sometimes you have to be the one to set them in a way that people cannot ignore. The school year ended on a high note, and as I packed up my things to move out of South Quad, I looked at the bunk bed one last time and felt a sense of peace. I had turned a terrible situation into a victory, and I was ready for whatever the next 3 years of university had in store for me. I walked out of the dorm and into the warm spring air of Ann Arbor, feeling like a true Michigan Wolverine who could handle anything that came my way. My story is a lesson to anyone who feels like they are being walked on by someone who thinks they are better than everyone else. You do not have to just take it, and you do not have to wait for someone else to fix it for you. You can take matters into your own hands and create your own justice. Just make sure you have a good plan and maybe a package of cookies to help you along the way. I am glad I shared this story because it is a part of my history, and it reminds me that I am capable and resourceful. Now, as I look out over the diag at the center of campus, I see thousands of students all with their own stories and their own struggles, and I hope that they all find their own way to stand up for themselves just like I did. Life at the University of Michigan is challenging and intense, but it is also where I found my voice and my strength. I will always remember my freshman year, not for the stress and the lack of sleep, but for the moment I took control of my life and gave my inconsiderate roommate exactly what she deserved. It was a long road to get there, but the destination was worth every second of the journey. I am proud of the person I have become, and I am proud of the way I handled the first big challenge of my adult life. I know that I have the courage to face any obstacle and the intelligence to solve any problem, and that is the best education I could have asked for from this prestigious university. I am Leela, and this was my revenge, and I would do it all over again if I had to, because peace of mind is the most valuable thing you can have in this world, and nobody has the right to take it away from you. I hope this story inspires someone else to find their own way to reclaim their life from the bullies and the arrogant people who think they can do whatever they want. Remember that you are stronger than you think, and you have more options than you realize. Stay strong and stay smart, and never be afraid to stand up for yourself, even if it means getting a little bit of revenge along the way. The sun is setting over the Michigan Union, and the sky is a beautiful shade of blue and maize, and I feel perfectly at home here in Ann Arbor. My journey is just beginning, and I am excited to see where it leads me next. I am ready for anything, and I am grateful for the lessons I have learned both in and out of the classroom. This is the end of my story for now, but I know there will be many more adventures to come as I continue my studies and my life here at the University of Michigan. Thank you for listening to my story, and I hope it brought a smile to your face just like it does to mine every time I think about it. Goodbye for now, and go blue.